Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest Eagle Eye podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, the Eagles are in their quasi off-season program right now. It's kind of exciting.
It is, and kudos to Nick Sirianni for orchestrating a compromise with the veterans. At one point, they weren't going to be here at all, according to the union and the NFLPA. So they're not doing the full regime. They're not doing the 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s, but they're getting work in person with the coaches, and it's really valuable. So good for him.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely valuable when you have new schemes, new people, new players, new coaches, and I think it'll help them out quite a bit. Today we have a lot to get to. There's a few new players in the mix. The Eagles have signed a guy. They traded for another guy. Ryan Kerrigan was a guest on Takeoff with John Clark. We had a chance to listen to some of that. It's our first chance to hear from Ryan Kerrigan about joining the Eagles. So we'll go through a little bit of what he had to say. And since the Eagles are actually at the facility right now, we had a chance to talk to a few players, including Jalen Hurts. So we'll kind of give our thoughts on what they had to say. And a little bit later, we have former NFL quarterback Matt Schaub joining us to talk about a bunch of different topics. That should be a really good conversation. But Rube, let's start today with the two newest Eagles, Reuben Clark, the offensive lineman, and Josiah Scott, the cornerback. Let's start with Clark, actually. He was signed just on Wednesday. Interesting. He has some experience. He's a former, a third-round draft pick out of Texas Tech. What do you make of this signing?
It's an interesting signing. It's one of those, he's been disappointing. He's for a third-round pick. He never really became – he started some games, never became a full-time starter. Kind of had a disappointing career. So we haven't seen the contract, but I'm sure it's a really cheap contract. He doesn't have a roster spot made, but it's a chance. He's coming off an injury, but a chance for him to revive his career, a chance for the Eagles to get a functional, maybe backup tackle. And I think it kind of maybe is a hint of what's to come with Andre Dillard. I think when you get tackle depth, you look at who's expendable, and Andre Dillard, certainly the way Jordan Mailata came on and the fact that Dillard can't back up right tackle, I think that's pretty clear. I think my first reaction was they're going to ship Dillard. So we'll see. I'm not sure if he's got a whole lot of value, but I'm not sure they really care about that. They might just want to move him and get anything, get a 6 for him. Which is embarrassing. The guy was a 1 a couple of years ago, but I don't really see where his future is here. I don't think he's a bad player as a left tackle. I think he's got a chance to be okay, but he'll never be Trey Thomas ever. Mailata's got the upside, and you bring in a guy in Reuben Clark who is probably never going to be more than a backup, but it's probably more valuable as a backup than Dillard. He's played right tackle. He's played left tackle. He's
played some guard too.
He's played some guard too. And it's really tough to have a backup who can only play one position, especially a first-round pick. So honestly, I'd be surprised if they don't ship Dillard somewhere. And this move kind of reinforces that for me.
Yeah, that was the first thought I had too. But you have to remember, Clark is coming off an injury. He tore his Achilles in December. So, I mean, there's not even a guarantee he's going to be ready in time to ship Dillard somewhere. And you can't be left. We saw what happened last year. They can't be left without backups. So, I mean, and I don't even know if it's fair to say, hey, they have Clark, now they can ship Dillard. Because, look, I think they're still a better team with Dillard here. I mean, I think he's a viable backup left tackle. Yeah, hey, maybe he could be a starter. I mean, we don't know that yet about him. The flexibility thing is an issue, but if you have other guys who are versatile, you can get by with a guy who's just a backup at one position. It's not ideal. But you said like trading for a 6. To me, that wouldn't be worth it. I don't know what they're thinking. I'd have to get more from him. I don't know what the market would be for him. I don't know if there's a team out there that really liked him in the draft a couple years ago that thinks, their starter gets hurt. They don't have any backup. And they think, hey, maybe this guy. I think that would be the situation where the Eagles trade him. But that was my first thought too. It was like, hey, they just brought this guy, and he knows Nick Sirianni's offense, by the way, or at least most of it. He was in Indy for the last few years. So he was a guy, I think it was at the Senior Bowl in 2016 when the Eagles did a lot of work at that Senior Bowl. That was the year that Carson was there, and I think Samalu was there. Sorry. I didn't mean to do it there. We're back to I tricked myself.
Usually it's me. I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah, it's so early. What were we, like 3 minutes into this? But Clark's interesting, and you're right. He hasn't lived up to. We
should actually get a board. We should actually get like.
One listener suggested we get a Carson jar, and every time one of us mentions him, we have to put $1 in the jar, and then we'll, after a year or so, we'll donate that money. I like that, but I mean, that's going to be a lot of money.
Pretty sizable donation for a good cause. And I also think, let's not forget Jack Driscoll, who I thought played pretty well. He was solid as a rookie 4th round pick last year at right tackle. We didn't see him play left tackle, but he could be a guy that fills that big V role and could play. We know he can play some guard as well. He could play. We know he can play right tackle. I think he can play left tackle. He didn't work there because because Lane was going through so much that they needed him at right tackle. But I think he's decent. So he's just kind of another piece of that tackle equation.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, they do have pretty good depth right now on the O-line. You have Dillard and Driscoll. I would think the backup at left tackle, the backup at right tackle. We'll see when Clark is healthy enough to get in the mix. And then interior, whenever Landon Dickerson's healthy, he's your backup, your top backup interior. But you also have Nate Herbig, who got a ton of playing time last year. Sua Opeta, who played quite a bit. All of a sudden, and Matt Pryor, they have a bunch of guys who, if they start to go through the injuries like they did last year, you feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah, that's the good side of all the injuries. You get experience for guys who normally wouldn't get it.
Yeah. And a guy like Nate Herbig, I don't know what the ceiling is, but I think they'd feel comfortable enough plugging him in if they need to here or there.
I thought he was pretty good. I thought he was, for considering, he was undrafted and he'd never played. And, when you talk to him, he seemed like it was way over his head, but when he played, he was fine and only going to get better. He's a young kid. I like Herbie.
Yeah, I do too. How about Josiah Scott? Interesting trade. And we didn't even mention him yet. We should have. Your guy, Jameson Houston, traded.
Yeah.
They traded Jameson Houston to Jacksonville along with a 6th round pick in 2023. I mean, that's almost has no value. We're trading 6th round picks in 2 years, but that's what Howie did to get Josiah Scott, who was a 4th round pick last year.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this trade was all about Jameson Houston and his value. I just like the name. It's so just classy sounding. Jameson Houston sounds like, some British, playwright of the 1600s, but yeah, I know everybody wanted him to sign a more established outside corner, and he's another slot type guy. He's not real big in stature. Again, he's played some. I mean, there's similar moves. I mean, obviously one was a scrap heap, one was a trade, but essentially you're getting guys who were backups and are depth pieces. I wouldn't think he's going to be playing a major role, but we'll see. 5'9", I believe.
Yeah, 5'9", 185. So
yeah,
he's a nickel.
Yeah. So if anything, it means, and we talked about Cravon, maybe bringing Cravon back. I wouldn't think after a move like this that you're going to be in a hurry to bring Cravon back. But they need outside corners. I don't know. I mean, just bringing it doesn't make it a bad move. I don't think they're doing this instead of addressing outside corner. It's just a guy that became available that they liked, and you throw him in the mix in the slot. I don't think it means they're done in the secondary because they still need help there. I still think the Ertz trade is going to go hand in hand with an outside corner coming here. We'll see how that goes. But again, these are moves that have no real downside. They're no risk moves. If they don't work out, didn't cost you anything or didn't cost you much. And we'll see if they, most likely these guys are never going to be a big part of what the Eagles do, but you have nothing to lose by bringing them in and taking a look at them, seeing what they can do, and maybe you get something.
Yeah, I mean that's especially true with Scott, who's a really young player. With Reuben Clark, I think you're probably banking on him being at least a backup, and you're relying on him in that sense. With Scott, you're seeing what you have. I mean, you're bringing him in, and I think it's important to note that just because they traded for Scott, it doesn't mean that they're out of the market for another corner. I think that's I don't think Howie's looking at like, I got my corner, I'm done. And at least I hope that's not what he's thinking, because they still have a clear need outside. And right now, I don't even know if Scott figures into the rotation, the mix. If they don't add somebody before training camp, I'd imagine you're going to see a bunch of different combinations at camp. We know Slay. The nice thing is Slay's there. You just put him up and you write him in pen as CB1, but then they probably mix in Avante at CB2. They probably have Zach McPherson get some reps there, and now you have Scott you can plug into the nickel. I don't imagine he's going to get much time outside, but probably mixing and matching, right? That's at least what I would think.
Well, I'll be shocked if like we said, I'll be shocked if they don't bring in another outside corner before camp starts. I think Michael Vick will be in that mix. They'll take a look at him. We know he's tough and physical. I just, whether he can run with the top guys in the division, I don't know. But I'll just be stunned if this is what they take into camp, or at least maybe a week in, or at some point they got to add a corner. You can't. I mean, I know every team's got issues. Every team's got areas that they're not happy with, but they really don't have a second outside cornerback at this point.
Yeah, and I think, and it's not a knock on Avante, I think it's pretty clear the outside corner is his weakest position. And
D tackle.
Well, yeah, quarterback maybe, but I mean he's not equipped to play out there, and it wasn't like he played horribly last year, but he wasn't good enough, and it showed it. Over the course of last season, we saw that he can't be CB2, and maybe the scheme will help him. Like maybe the scheme will help all the corners in a way if they're in more zone and there's more cover too. But I still think he needs an upgrade there, and I think Howie knows that. I think he's smart enough to realize that, and I still think Avante can be an important part. I mean, I still think he can be the nickel. I still think I would still use him at safety in a pinch. I don't know if they would do that because they have other guys there. They have Harris and McLeod when he's healthy, and Kayvon and Epps and all those guys. But I still like the idea of Avante at safety, and they really shied away from it a few years ago. But I think he can play. I just don't think they did him any favors last year by playing him out of position.
And the injuries are a concern too. He can't stay on the field. Kayvon and Avante both have that. Both have that issue. And maybe part of that is playing outside and getting too many reps and playing out of position. But it's hard to rely on a guy that can't stay on the field.
Yeah, it's tough. We had a chance to listen to Ryan Kerrigan on Takeoff with John Clark. Interesting interview, and Clarky did a great job with it. He also surprised Kerrigan, brought in Lane Johnson. So it was a fun listen. Make sure to check it out and subscribe to Takeoff with John Clark. What were your impressions of hearing Kerrigan for the first time as an Eagle?
Yeah, I think I was telling you last night, it reminded me of, I don't know if you remember the Johnny Carson show, but Don Rickles would always just show up and surprise whoever, he would just show up and he was out of the curtain. There was Don Rickles, and whoever the guest was would be like, "Oh my God." And Carson would laugh. And that's what it reminded me of, because all of a sudden there's Lane Johnson and Kerrigan got a kick out of it. And it was really almost Takeoff with Lane Johnson, because Lane got a lot out of Kerrigan, and he's a tough one to crack. He doesn't say a whole lot, but it was fun to listen to them talk about playing against each other. And they both kind of really honed in on the other ones. I mean, they've played against each other for since 2013, since Lane's rookie year, and they both kind of gave scouting reports on the other one, their strengths and weaknesses. It was fun hearing hearing Lane talk about how Kerrigan used to set him up by lining up wide and then taking, making an inside move. And it was a lot of fun for that X. If you're into that X and O type, really, I mean, a multiple Pro Bowl right tackle and a multiple Pro Bowl edge rusher who've played against each other for years in the same division, to talk about facing each other and now becoming teammates. It was really good stuff. And you'll get a kick out of this interview. And Lane was great. I mean, Lane's got a little bit more of a personality than Ryan, but Ryan was good. I mean, he was good talking
Lane's
about
got a little bit more of a personality than everybody.
He does. But it was a lot of fun to listen to. And, it's going to be, and they both talked about how much they're looking forward to practicing against each other and continuing to bring out the best in each other. Lane was funny. He said, Kerrigan's notorious for not trash talking. He just doesn't say a word. And Lane said, like, he's always working on him and trash talking and saying this and saying that. He said, for 8 years, I thought he was deaf because he would never react to anything I said. And Kerrigan said, I heard all of it. I was just too tired to say anything back. But it was good stuff and highly recommended. Great job by Clarkey.
Yeah. And, the beginning of it, before Lane took over the show, Kerrigan did get into the reasons he signed here. And a big reason was the scheme. Gannon's scheme. He likes it. He thinks it fits what he wants to do more than, some of the other teams. We heard maybe Pittsburgh was sniffing around him. That'd be a 3-4. So it makes sense that he felt like this scheme was a little bit better for him. But he also said the Eagles kind of made a full court press. It was guys like Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox recruiting him. It was multiple phone calls from Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. Even Jeffrey Lurie texted him. So, I mean, they made a real effort to get him. And Kerrigan was actually surprised that no one found out about it. He said, I thought for sure the mutual interest would end up out there, and it really didn't. So everyone kind of kept that close to the vest. But interesting guy. I think he has something left. And we talked to JP Finley last week or earlier this week, and he certainly thinks he has something left. Someone who's seen him quite a bit. He's a smart player. That's the thing about it. It's like, if he was just some physical freak that was getting by on his athleticism, yeah, it probably drops off at a certain point. But even just with that conversation you heard Kerrigan talking with Lane, I mean, he's a smart player. He's a savvy veteran at this point. So anything he's lost athletically, he might be able to gain back just by being a crafty player and understanding how to set up tackles and understanding his angles and those sort of things. So I'm really intrigued by the move. People have talked about Chris Long. Kerrigan has been a much better player than Chris. I mean, Chris was good, and he was obviously really good here, and he really fit the scheme. But, I mean, when we're talking about the quality of player, and this is not a knock on Chris, who I thought had a really nice, long career. I mean, Ryan Kerrigan, 95.5 sacks,
Yeah. It's and I think, there's been a lot of talk about what he brings as far as leadership and experience and culture. But they brought him in to get to the quarterback. I mean, they didn't bring him in to be some kind of, veteran leader. I mean, maybe that's a byproduct of having him here. But they brought him into play. And I'll tell you what, there's not a lot of teams that can have a rotation like BG, Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett, and Ryan Kerrigan going after the quarterback. That's terrific depth. We know Gannon wants to rotate these guys, especially when two of them are in their 30s, a couple of years into their 30s. I think it's a great setup. I think it's a great rotation. I don't know if any of them will have 10 sacks, but I would think all four of them would have, between 5 and 8. And, the Eagles didn't have anybody with a ton of sacks last year, but they had the second highest percentage of pressures by their defensive front, according to Pro Football Focus, without blitzing. So the talent is there to get after quarterbacks. And I think that goes hand in hand with the secondary might be undermanned, but if you're getting that kind of pressure, you can take some of the pressure off the D-backs.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't even talk about the interior guys, but when you're lining up those 4 edge rushers, and then you have Fletcher, Javon Hargrave, Milton Williams, Hassan Ridgeway, Tua Peloto. I mean, you have
Milton's ahead of Ridgeway now. I like that. Okay.
Well, I don't know. he's raw, so it's tough to tell exactly how ready he'll be. But I think
he'll be the third guy in.
I mean, physically, he's a freak,
Yeah.
So I think is he ready to really be a contributor in the NFL? I don't know that yet, but either way, I mean, that is a stocked defensive line.
It is, and I mean, you're going 4 deep outside and 4 or 5 deep inside, depending on, depending on who makes the team. There's still a lot that has to happen, but they're all going to play. I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, anybody who's dressed on the D line is going to play, and it's going to be, especially late in games, these guys are going to be fresh. It's going to be fun to watch. You can make a case. It's one of the top 3 or 4 D lines in the league. I mean, they're that good.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are other deficiencies, as we just talked about, on this defense. And if you're the Eagles, you hope that this covers it up a little bit. But that was kind of the plan last year too.
Right.
So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
Yeah. We had a chance to talk to a few veterans on Wednesday. Jason Kelce, Brandon Graham, and now a veteran, I guess, Jalen Hurts. Let's start with Hurts, because this was our first chance to talk to him since the end of the season. A lot has changed since then. Head coach gone, starting quarterback gone.
It's already set. You can say his name now.
Okay, Carson Wentz gone, Doug Peterson gone. They draft Devontae Smith, they draft Landon Dickerson, and they don't draft a quarterback. They don't acquire a quarterback aside from Joe Flacco. For whatever reason, Nick Sirianni, and we know the reason, he wants to preach competition. It's probably not a good look to just hand over the keys publicly to Jalen Hurts. We all know the situation. He's the starter, and I'm sure Jalen Hurts understands it too. He was asked about that in a bunch of different ways on Wednesday, the fact that he hasn't been named the starter. And I loved his answers, because there's just zero entitlement from this kid.
It's really refreshing. And he said, he basically said, just paraphrasing, he's like, I'm not here to be handed anything. I'm here to work for everything I get. That's the only reason I'm here. I don't want anything given to me. And Dave, I don't know if he can play. We'll find out, but he's such a pleasure to listen to his approach to everything. And it all starts, he's such a serious kid, and it all starts with hard work, commitment, dedication. He's almost sounds like, a really gung-ho high school kid who's just, willing to do anything to make the varsity or something like that. He's got like almost like an innocence about him that way. And he kept answering the question the same way. Like, why should I be handed anything? I'm going to go out there and work. It's May, and I'm going to go out and compete. And I'm not above that, and I'm not better than that. And again, I don't want to make this into a Carson versus Jalen thing, because I don't know if Jalen will ever be anywhere near the talent that Carson is, or have anywhere near the season that Carson had in 2017. I have no idea,
or the other years,
or 18 or 19, or even 16. But you're right. But it's refreshing to hear that kind of attitude when, the last guy, at least it came across as all about entitlement. The kid is,
and it's not, I want to point out, it's not just Carson. This league has kind of gone in that direction. It kind of encourages entitlement from that position. They're the highest paid players. They're protected by the rules. This offseason, we've seen quarterbacks use their power to get what they want. And it was refreshing, not just from a Carson standpoint, but a league standpoint, to see a quarterback be like, no, I'm one of the players here. I'm not the quarterback. I'm one of the guys in the room who has to abide by whatever the head coach says.
And the other players, they know that, they hear it, and that means a lot to them. When he's not putting himself above any of the other 89 guys on the roster. He's just another guy competing for a job, competing for playing time. And he's not putting himself ahead of anybody. They hear that, and they appreciate it, and they admire it. And they'll go to the end of the earth to block for that guy or catch a pass from that guy, or whatever it is. He's going to win over that team. He's going to win over that locker room. I think he's already in the process of doing that.
Yeah, I think he did it last year a little too early, and that was part of the problem.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like what you said a little bit ago, because it's true. I mean, if Jalen Hurts fails as an NFL quarterback, it'll be because he's not good enough. It won't be because for a lack of effort or a lack of hard work or not having the right mindset. All those intangible things he has. The only question is whether or not he's talented enough, if his arm is talented enough to become a high caliber NFL starting quarterback. And we'll see. We'll see about that. But I have zero questions about the rest of it.
I'm even willing to say he's going to have a long career in the league, and I don't know what shape that'll take. But I've seen enough just already as far as the off the field stuff, and in the limited time he played last year. I don't know if he'll be a starter. I don't know what his role will be. But he's going to be in the league. I mean, he's good enough, whether it's a backup or a starter, a star, or just a guy that's good to have on your team and a good backup. He'll be in this league, I think, as long as he's healthy, because can he be a guy that goes out and starts 16 or 17 games a year and makes the playoffs more often than not, and competes for, takes you, to compete for something in January or February? I don't know, but he'll be in the league. He's that good.
Yeah, I agree. You got anything else from Hurts? He talked about Devontae Smith a little bit. He mentioned that, I think we've probably heard this before, but he hosted Devontae on his visit to Alabama, and he kind of gave an insight to the way those visits normally work. It's like sometimes, a guy comes, you want to show him the Strip, which is like the main drag in Tuscaloosa, or you want to take him to a party. You want to show him all the college has to offer, not just football. And Devontae, he said, just wasn't interested in anything other than football. He was I want to know about the program. I want to work out. Which it tells you at an early age, there's always been a maturity with Devontae. And I think that's what we've really learned about him over the last few months since the Eagles drafted him.
And Devontae reminds you of Jalen, and Jalen even said that. He said he's a lot like me. They both come across really similar, just very focused, determined, serious-minded young kids that love ball. Somebody asked Hurts about being teammates with Landon Dickerson. They weren't teammates. I don't know. You got to check that stuff out before you ask that question. But I don't want to rip anybody. But no, it was good to talk to him. I loved his attitude, and we'll see how far that takes him.
Yeah, Kelsey, always great to talk to Jason Kelsey. One of the all-time interviews, and I think some interview subjects get heralded as great interview subjects because they give you great one-liners. That's not necessarily the case with Jason Kelsey, but every answer he gives is so insightful,
thoughtful.
You learn something every time he speaks, and that's why I enjoy talking to him so much. It should come as no surprise after what he said last year about tanking and what he believes in the NFL, that he thinks the Eagles have a chance to win this year. He thinks they have a chance to win the NFC East. He understands that. He was asked if they're in a transition period. He's like, of course we're in a like, look at us. We have a new quarterback, new coach. Like, we're in a transition period. But he pointed out, and we've pointed this out before, that the NFL is different than some other sports. You can win in a transition period. There's enough parity in the league that being in a transition period or a rebuild does not prohibit you from winning some games and putting yourself in the mix.
Yeah, and he pointed to his hometown team, the Browns, who went 12-4 in Kevin Stefanski's first year after 13 straight losing seasons, and even Washington in Ron Rivera, I guess that was his first year, right? That was Rivera's first year last year. It's all a blur to me, but they won the division, and they didn't have a great record, but they won the division, and it was a competitive division. It wasn't a good division, but it was competitive. But you can do that. And I mean, I've talked a lot about, Chip in 13. I mean, that was a mess that Andy left in 2012. That team had quit. I mean, they lost 11 of the last 12 games. So a new coach can come in and there's almost in that reset process, it gives guys hope. You have a guy that's as positive as Nick Sirianni, as energetic. It's just what this team needs. And it seems like these guys are responding to that. And, I've been doing this for long enough to know it's a really thin line between being 4-12 and being 12-4. I mean, it comes down to, and it's a cliche about detailing your work, but I mean, one more play. I mean, what percent of games are one possession games? Like over 40%, right?
Yeah.
So you make that one more play, and now you win 3 or 4 more games, and now you're thinking like, oh, we're pretty good here. We're winning games. So if you do the right things during the offseason personnel wise, I think the Eagles are off to a good start. I think they've done some good things. You can win, and that was Kelsey's point. And he even said, I think one of the reasons I'm here is to help kind of facilitate that process and get these guys to believe that they can win, and believe that they can turn it around overnight. Because in the NFL, and I'll never forget Jeff Lurie's phrase, it was probably 25 years ago, that he used the phrase nonlinear progression. Talking about it's not like you go like, I think in some sports, you win, like in baseball, you win 60, then you win 80, then you win 9, whatever. But I think the NBA is like that. You don't see huge jumps, but in football, this is what the league wants. It's what they got. And I think it's important for this team to believe that they can win. And having someone like Jason Kelsey, who's revered in that locker room, or a Brandon Graham or a Fletcher Cox, having those kind of guys who've been on a Super Bowl team say it. A Super Bowl team that, by the way, a year earlier went 6-10 or 7-9. And lost 5 straight games, and was left for dead. I think that's really, really valuable for these young guys to hear that message from a Jason Kelsey, and he believes it. I mean, because he doesn't say anything that he doesn't believe. And when he says, we can win while we're transitioning, he's absolutely right.
Anything from Brandon Graham stand
The
out to you?
one thing I liked from BG was I asked him about the young talent on the D line. And we were just talking about this a few minutes ago. And he loves these guys. He said that they're the most talented young guys as far as being ready, for meetings, being ready for practice. He said they came in like their 2nd or 3rd round pros, as far as just not being overwhelmed at their first practices, their first meetings, and that kind of thing. So he said they're keeping me on my toes. He says I got to really work hard. He said to make the team. He's going to make the team. But it was good to hear. I mean, he's really bullish on these young kids, and we'll see how they all fit in. But he's excited about what they have on the D line.
Who do you think has more energy, Nick Sirianni or Brandon Graham?
BG.
Did you see Sirianni at practice? The Eagles tweeted out a photo of him wearing a Brandon Graham T-shirt.
Yeah, that's like energy squared. Yeah, I think Brandon Graham's got more energy than anyone I've ever met.
That might be true.
Yeah, he is something else. He's and it's who he is. It's not a show. It's not a put on. I mean, it's not an act. I mean, he's he lives it. And but yeah, they're both birds of a feather, no doubt.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast, former NFL quarterback and the pride of Westchester East, Matt Schaub. Matt, how you doing, man?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. First off, how's retirement treating you?
Yeah, it's been great. To be quite honest with you, for the months of January through basically now, my life hasn't been much different than it would if I was playing next year, just because of the downtime, the off season. You kind of, have your, time's your own. And aside from the type of workouts I'm doing, it's really no different. But, now the teams are starting to get back into the off-season conditioning mode, or OTAs are coming around and mini camp. It's starting to hit me now. I'm like, well, I don't have any cleats that I need to get ready or a helmet to put on. I think August will be a big adjustment. I think that's the month when it will really sink in. I haven't had an August free in like 30 years. So I think that'll be different, not having to go to a 2-a-day in 100-degree heat. That'll be a welcome change. Trust me.
Oh, there's no more 2-a-days. Come on now.
Wow, you're true. Yeah, it's very true. There's no more 2-a-days. Those have gone by the wayside. So,
yeah, no more Houston in August. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank God. Yeah, I don't miss those days. Those 2-a-days back in 2007 through the new CBA in 11 when that was signed. I mean, those were brutal. Those 2-a-days were the worst thing ever.
Yeah,
when do you know it's time to move on? And I know it's the hardest thing for so many athletes to figure out. You don't want to go out there if you're not capable of doing it anymore, but
yeah,
it's a great life. How do you know when it's time?
I think it's different for everybody. For me, I wanted to go out on my own terms. I think, I've been here now with the Atlanta Falcons 5 years as of this end of last season. And, my family's in a great place. My kid's in school, trying to chase another year and maybe move somewhere, or, my family stay here and me go somewhere else. I had done that, after I left Houston and went to Oakland for a year and Baltimore for a year before coming to Atlanta. I had already done that to them, and my family sacrificed a lot and supported me through a lot of things that, it was time for me to take the back seat. And, my contract was up with the Falcons, the change in staff and everything like that. I knew where they were going in the direction that they needed to go as a franchise and as a team. So I understood that, the chances of me coming back and playing for my hometown team, wasn't going to happen. So, I just knew it was time for me to move on and search other endeavors. And all the while knowing that I could still play and I could still fill in when needed. I got an opportunity, not this past season, but the year before, when Matt was nicked up for a game and was able to play against Seattle and show that I could still throw it around the field a little bit. So, for me, it was just all stars were aligned for me, as far as contract being up. 17 years, it was a heck of a journey, and, the opportunity to move on to other things here as I knock on the door of 40 years old.
So, Matt, we're really happy to have you, because quarterback with the Philadelphia Eagles right now is a really interesting and it's been a wild position for them over the last couple of years. I wanted to start with Jalen Hurts. We only got to see him for 4 games last year. Obviously, a really accomplished college quarterback. What have you seen from him? I mean, do you think that, based on the small sample size we have, that he could become a long-term viable option for this team?
I think he could. I think he really can. I love his maturity. I love his ability to handle the ebbs and flows of an NFL game, an NFL season. I think he's, obviously it's a small sample size, the 4 games that he played in, but I think you go back to his college career and his time in Alabama, and then making the decision and understanding where he was in his development and saying, I'm going to go to Oklahoma for a year and light it up. I mean, he showed that he can really take control of the entire offense and throw it, as well as show off his athleticism running the football. But I think he really showed in his time at Oklahoma how well he can throw the football and how accurate he can be and understanding game plans. And I think just that transition from probably the number 1 college program in Alabama, transitioning to another top 5 program and doing what he did, it just shows his calm demeanor and his ability to handle that scrutiny and that criticism that comes with playing the position at those places. And I think going to a place like Philadelphia, where obviously you're going to have that same level of scrutiny and that criticism, and you're going to be the toast of the town when things are going good. And you're also going to be, talked about and criticized from Monday morning till Sunday at 1 o'clock when the next kickoff happens. And I think he really showed his ability to handle those things really well. And I just look for him to take those 4 games that he played in and just build on them and expand. I think the coaching staff there and Shane Steichen, they're really going to have to play to his strengths this year going into the season and helping him develop and take that next step.
What about the flip side? And I think we agree with everything you just said. Carson goes to Indy. How big can a change of scenery be? I mean, we know how talented he is. Frank Reich is a coach that I think we all have a ton of respect for. What are your expectations of Carson out there? And how valuable can, a fresh start be for someone like that?
Yeah, a fresh start could be everything. Carson, it's only 2 years ago. I mean, he was playing at an MVP level. I mean, for a couple of years, I mean, he was playing lights out football. And, I think he's definitely a product of, which much of us are at the position of what's around you. And I think injuries last year, especially up front on the offensive line, Didn't help the cause, didn't help the situation. And I think injuries across the board at every position didn't help. And, the lack of running game last year definitely hurt his ability to be successful. But I think a change of scenery, a fresh start, a place like Indianapolis, like you said, with Frank Reich and his ability to call plays and dial things up. And you pair that with the defense that they play there in Indy, in the division that they play in the AFC South, which, for all intents and purposes is wide open. I mean, it looks like it's Indy and Tennessee and everybody else. And so, and you give them a run game and the offensive line that Indy's had. I mean, Phillip Rivers went there last year for one season. And, after all those years with the Chargers, and he came in and manned the ship. And with the running game that they had, the offensive line, Phillip didn't get touched. And I think that just bodes well for Carson to be able to stand in there and trust what he's seeing and let it rip. And then the defense is always going to keep him in football games up there in Indy.
I wanted to ask you about one of your former teammates, Joe Flacco, who, a few years ago, a lot got made of, is he going to be the veteran to help the young kid come along? That was a long time ago, and it probably got blown out of proportion. But what do you think about him being in that sort of competition? But we know the backup role for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I love the move for Joe. I mean, he's a local product, from just across the way there in Jersey. So, and I was with Joe my 1 year in Baltimore back in 2015. So I think he's going to be a great presence for Jalen, a calming, steady influence. And, he's going to compete. Joe's a competitor. And, I know all things are saying that there's going to be competition and you have to have that to make everyone else better on the football team. But it is going to be Jalen's spot. And I like Joe's just calming influence and the way he can just help Jalen through the ups and downs. And, Joe had them throughout his career, but hey, he's a Super Bowl MVP. He had one of the best runs a quarterback's ever had in the playoffs back when they won it in 2012. So I think Joe can be a great influence on Jalen's development. And it's always nice, especially as a young quarterback, when you have a veteran presence that's been there, done that, walked that line, and has seen it all and been through it all. And I think that can only benefit Jalen and his development and everyone on the football team. I mean, just think about a lot of the young players. Jalen's going to have so much on his plate to look at himself and work on his own game. But you have a lot of young football players that, a Joe Flacco in a backup role can help during the week, during game plan, throughout training camp, guys on defense, guys up front, guys on the outside, like a Devontae Smith and how he's going to, translate at the wide receiver position to just jump into the number one receiver role. There's so many ways that he can help the football team behind the scenes that no one's going to see, no one's going to hear about other than players talking to the media about him or coaches, but he can really impact that locker room in a huge way.
I'm going to ask about another one of your teammates because he's one of my favorite guys ever. And I've been covering this team since '87. And whenever I asked Michael Vick about you, he had a big smile would come on his face. And he'd go, "Oh, Schaub." He'd say, "Schaub taught me how to run."
Well, I tried to get number 7 from Mike when I got to Atlanta back in 2004. I wore 7 in Virginia, and it was just a joke. I was like, "Hey, I got $20. It's right out of the ATM if you're willing to do it." And he said he was willing to, but the NFL wouldn't have it. But yeah, me and Mike go way back, man. I learned a lot from Mike. Obviously coming out of Virginia Tech, Virginia, you look at Mike and his game, and then you look at me. And when I was drafted in the 3rd round, I'm like, I'm not that fast. I don't know if something happens to Mike. Like the playbook's got to change. Like I can't do all this stuff. But it made for an interesting room, and especially that week that Virginia and Virginia Tech played. But I for me coming into the league, and you have one of the most visible athletes alongside Tiger Woods at the time in all of the world. Mike Vick and Tiger Woods were probably the 2 most recognizable athletes across any sport, anywhere at that point in time. And for me to watch what he had to deal with throughout the week, game plan and meetings, media obligations, the scrutiny, this and that, was unprecedented for me just to understand and taking notes saying, if I get an opportunity to be the quarterback of a football team, this is how I'm going to do it. Or just taking little notes and pages from his book. And, when I got traded to Houston a month before everything happened with Mike and, his, well-documented, situation that went down, but I couldn't have been more pleased and happy to see him come out of it and link up with Andy Reid there in Philadelphia and what he was able to do with his career, I mean, was just fantastic to watch from afar, knowing him as a guy.
What was that like?
He's doing a podcast. Excuse me, I was just going to say he's doing a podcast with Marty Morningwig. That's going to be fast. I can't wait to listen to that because that's two great minds right there.
It is two great minds, and Marty's not shy about voicing his opinion and just letting things fly. There's not much filter there.
That's true.
Yeah, there's some high-level football talk going on with Marty too. Higher for anyone else. No one else knows what he's talking about, but Marty's got it down. What was that like? You mentioned it just briefly, but watching Mike come out of it and landing, obviously it was a huge story here in Philly, and a lot of people were against it, and he just had to kind of stick with it and make it through. How closely were you following that whole process with him here in Philly?
Yeah, obviously, me handling my own business down in Houston with the Texans, it was hard to really just be in tune with everything, but you obviously hear about it. It's well talked about. And so I kept one eye on it and, following the news, but I think it showed a lot about Andy Reid and the leap of faith that he took and just bringing him in. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a more steady hand and a steady head coach and a leader of a football team than Andy. And, when he's willing to make a move like that and step out on that limb, and put his faith and trust in Mike, and that he's, come on the other side of it and, trying to right that ship. And, Mike showed that he was willing to do that and, faced a lot of criticism. But he stood up at the mic and handled himself like the pro that Mike's always been. And, to have success as well, I think put a lot of people at ease with that. But I mean, there's always, no matter what you do, no matter what happens with you, whether it's in the off the field or between the white lines, you're always going to have people that are on your side. You're always going to have people that talk negative about you. There's going to be varying opinions, and that comes with the territory of playing sports, but also playing quarterback in the National Football League. So you're always going to have people that like you, that don't like you, and everything in between. And that's just the way, that's what we signed up for. And, you got to find a way for 3 hours on Sunday to tune that out and go and cut it loose.
Last thing from me, Matt, is I got to ask you about a game against the Jaguars in 2012, threw for 527 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think Andre Johnson had almost 300 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I think you won it on a touchdown pass to Andre. It wasn't field goal or anything. It was touchdown, 48 yards. I think Chad Henne had like almost 500 yards for Jacksonville overtime game. Only one person in NFL history has thrown for more yards in a game than you did that day. Who is it? Can you name that guy?
No, I cannot, but I know I'm tied with Warren Moon in second there. I know
tied
that
with
much.
Warren Moon, good company in second, but yeah, Norm Van Brocklin.
That's right. That's right.
The only guy to throw for more yards. He did it with the Rams, not with the Eagles, in 1951 against the New York Yankees. So he's playing a baseball team, so no wonder he had a lot of yards. But yeah, what do you remember about what do you remember about that day throwing for 527 yards?
Yeah, it didn't feel like it at the time. When you're playing the game, you're just whatever you need to do to win and whatever it takes. And Jacksonville at that time, had a good defensive front, so we weren't really getting a lot out of the run game. And we were able to throw it with success. And so that's the way. And our defense was struggling that day. Like you said, Chad Henne came off the bench when Blaine Gabbert got hurt and ended up throwing for close to 400 yards in like 3 quarters of football. So we kind of had to throw it to keep up with them. And we ended up in overtime. And I think we both might have turned it over once in overtime, or we punted it away once or twice each team. And then I was able to, get Andre on a little wide receiver screen into a pressure that Jacksonville brought off that same side. And so the body count was in our favor, and we got some good blocks on the outside by some offensive linemen. And Andre did what he's done for years. And that's just, take it all the way. But it was a great battle. I mean, just one of those classic divisional matchups that, you're going to get somebody's best shot when you're sitting at, I don't even remember what it was. We were like 7-1 at the time. So you're going to get everybody's best shot when you're leading your division. And Jacksonville came out swinging, but we were able to stand up and find a way to make a play at the end of the game.
I think Dre's the coolest person I've ever met. He's just, right. I mean, he's just the coolest dude ever. And he's so underrated in the grand scheme of things.
He is. He's probably the most quiet, humble, team first ballot Hall of Famer potential I've ever been around. I mean, that's up for argument from a lot of people, but in my book, he is. But I remember when I got to Houston, I had a conversation on the phone with Andre, and he probably said 3 words in a 5-minute conversation. And I think I might have heard 3 sentences from him that first season, because he doesn't talk a lot, and that's just his personality, and it's fine. But no one worked harder than him, and that's rare at that position, at that level, and that caliber of receiver. But he was always wanting to do more, get extra throws in, do extra after practice. He'd always be there in the offseason program and OTAs. And that's very rare. And that's the exception when you talk about a top 5 wide receiver in the game. And, but the guy put team first above anything else that he was doing personally, because he knew that the ball was coming his way. You know, we were going to try to get it to him the 5 of the first 5 throws. And the other team knew that too. And it was like, stop him. And, you know, just the physical presence that he meant to us on the field was second to none.
Before we let you go, we do have to ask you about Brandon Brooks, who you were teammates with briefly in Houston. He's obviously was hurt last year, but become one of the better guards in the league. What do you remember about him as a young pup?
Well, I mean, aside from like a Andre Johnson type wide receiver, when you see that you draft a guy like a Brandon Brooks and you see his size, one, and then like his athletic ability too, and you're sitting there at quarterback, you're just like, to your front office, you're like, great move. This is the best thing that's happened to us. So when he walked in and I just saw his physical ability to just lock people down as a young player. And when he came in, he stepped in at guard for us, and he had Chris Myers on one side of him, and he had Dwayne Brown on the other, tackle, and you got all these veteran guys to learn from. I mean, it was just a recipe for success for him and his career as a young player. But I couldn't have been more excited when we brought him in to Houston, because he was just a road grader in the run game, but also, you know, he was a monster to handle, you know, in a pass rush situation, and, you know, no one was getting by him. But the thing that stuck out to me was his athletic ability at that size. Dwayne Brown's a big guy at tackle. Now he's with Seattle, and, you know, he was a converted tight end when he was at Virginia Tech, then moved to tackle. And so he's a natural athlete himself. But when Brandon came in and was able to run the striders and the gassers we were running, or go through the speed ladder like wide receivers, it was just like, holy smokes, like, you are one of the most athletic 340, 350-pound dudes I've ever seen in my life. So I hope you can block somebody, because this is just too good to be true. And sure enough, he could do all of it. So, but, you know, I couldn't have been more excited for him when he moved on to Philadelphia and, you know, signed a big deal and then got the extension. And I'm just looking forward to seeing him healthy and back out there, because, you know, when that offensive line there in Philadelphia is 100% healthy, I mean, we saw it back during the Super Bowl run, and then for a couple of years up until last season when all the injuries hit, you know, they were second to none in the entire NFL as far as run blocking, pass protection. And so I look for big things from Brandon, just jump back in there and play at a, you know, all pro level.
Hey, Matt, we really appreciate the time. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Let's do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I got a lot of time on my hands now.
All right. Thanks again, Matt.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. That was a lot of fun talking to former NFL quarterback Matt Schaub. A lot of good insight from him. Really fun podcast. We got into a lot. Make sure to check out Takeoff with John Clark, the latest episode with Ryan Kerrigan. For Rube, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you next time.